Thessalar was a master transmuter and a creator of monsters. Anonymous. Welcome, humble adventurers, to my realm of knowledge and mystery. Here, in my cursed library, are endless tomes and scrolls on the darkest and evilest foes in all the realms. Be they from Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, the many worlds of darkness, or any realm in between. Welcome to the Dastardly decimal system. I'm your caretaker of the corrupt, the librarian, Castor Cain. And supervising, as always, is Vega the cat. A rivalry between two evil foes is a vastly dangerous thing. When a rival between two good, moral-standing characters occur, they do their best to limit the damage to innocents and the surrounding areas. If a rivalry occurs between a good and a good soul is often seen taking a loss in order to protect the nearby innocents, because that's what heroes do. But when two evil foes feud, the whole world suffers. When you have the magic of the universe at your fingertips, a desire to kill in your heart, and a sociopathic, uncaring attitude towards those around you, the damage can be catastrophic. For today's topic, I have brewed a pot of mimic tea. This is a blend of black tea, ginger, cinnamon, and licorice root. So take a seat, have a glass, and join Vega and I as we travel to the Temple of Moloch and study Thessalar, the architect of monsters. As a human, Thessalar was known as an old and withered man. His once vibrant blue eyes were pale and listless. He had white hair that he kept in a long, wizard-esque beard. He wore long robes with golden stripes and a matching headpiece, one that had a blue gem directly at the center. He had a homunculus with him, one that was built to look like a miniature version of Moloch, including jewels for the eyes. Thessalar had subjected himself to so many of his own experiments that his blood had taken on alchemical and magical properties. He is now immune to poison, but any magical liquid or salve that normally heals now does damage to him. As a lich, Thessalar has a sickly green skull, long locks of matted white hair. He wears a bronze, jewel-encrusted serpent crown and a silver serpent collar around his neck. Thessalar is a vastly intelligent artificer. He is a skilled alchemist with access to such favored spells such as Ray of Sickness, Melf's Acid Arrow, Stinking Cloud, Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound, Otiluc's Resilient Sphere, and the devastating Cloud Kill. His alchemical skills are so great that he can create a potion of greater restoration every day from just a few alchemical supplies. Thessalar carries a magic dagger coated with Thessal toxin. That is an alchemic substance, of his own design, that when injured or ingested, forcibly polymorphs a person into a random beast form and trapping them in that state until the end of the next long rest. Any who met Thessalar could instantly tell that he was a genius. They could also tell that something about him was off. From a young age, Thessalar was desperate to find a challenge for his vast intellect. To him, the world felt dull, slow, and without inspiration. If something was so well known that even the common man could understand it, like magic or science, then why should he devote his time to it? Instead, he turned his attention to something that was still unexplainable: the miracle of life. How had life come to exist? How did some creatures evolve while others perished? How could a single carnal act result in a fully developed mind and consciousness? Thessalar understood life and birth. Daddy Lich had given him the birds and the bees conversation, but he was still fascinated by the unregulated chaos of it all. If nature could produce everything it had with its own unregulated growth and evolution, then he, with his intelligent design, could produce something far, far greater. It was like someone came up to him and told him the story of the birds and the bees. And instead, he was like, what if I mash them together? Thessalar began to study magic and science, focusing his direction towards life and mutations. He developed a new substance, a combination of shuddering flesh and fluid he called proto-life. He would eject it into a pregnant creature and watch how the newborn baby would be born, a horrid mutant that rarely lived past a few painfully excruciating minutes of life. Experiments were not cheap and often required vast amounts of magic. Needing both, Thessalar began to search for a way to obtain them. This led him to the Temple of Moloch. The Temple of Moloch was built on a series of caverns where the elemental princes Olihydra and Ogremotch once battled. Their war opened a rift to their elemental planes, bringing with them massive gemstones. When the ancient people stumbled across these jewels, their greed led them to collect as many of the gems as possible, and then use them to build a temple in honor of Moloch. Centuries later, Thessalar found the temple and joined. The temple was small compared to today, but their resources were vast. The artificer was content with that for a period, but after a while he became seduced by the power and authority the temple held. One day, Thessalar slew most of his fellow cultists in a dark and bloody ritual, taking control of the organization and, more importantly, their resources. Thessalar immediately began the vast expansion of his temple and, of course, his experiments. Thessalar would experiment on anything or anyone he saw fit, with or without their consent. He took a loyal assistant, a human named Andrastolos, and magically split him into two feuding beings. Andras was given the head of a large owl, granting him the ability to turn his head almost full around for 360-degree vision, and he gave Stolos the body of a giant snowy owl. He experimented on Barbatos, a loyal evil ranger who would bring him animals to experiment with. As part of his wages, Thessalar wired several items to the ranger's body. His backpack had a troll heart wired directly to his own, granting him regeneration, while his cloak incorporated the feathery antennae of several rust monsters. Yet of all of his experiments, the ones he is most proud of are his Thessal monsters. They are aberrations created from the unborn young of a monster. He injected proto-life into the egg of a hydra, giving birth to the Thessal Hydra. This terrible creature had 8 heads that surrounded a large, circular mouth rimmed with jagged teeth. Its maw dripped with acid and its tail ended with a pair of sharp pincers. Thinking that the legendary Kraken was not scary enough, he also created the Thessal Kraken. This was a smaller version than the original, but one with far more teeth that consistently dripped acid. There was also the Thessalar construct. This is a strange and mechanical device that struts around like a chicken and has a human heart beating wildly behind a pane of glass. The construct has a telepathic connection with Thessalar, informing him of any who enters the temple. In his time in control of the temple, he took several apprentices. His most famous one was Nulzer. The human came to him as a lowly thief. This was years before he would become a famous magician. But at that time, Nulzer studied alchemy underneath Thessalar, and even infused his own body with strange and dangerous properties. Ironically, for one so obsessed with life, Thessalar turned to undeath in order to continue his life and his experiments. Now, as a lich, he continued his work. He traveled through the stars and across the realms to different worlds, collecting new and different animals and beasts, but he always returned to his temple. He would, however, eventually depart the temple, lured out by the actions of Chaos, the Elder Evil. Chaos had used a living creature as a vector towards undeath, and Thessalar needed to know more. He moved to Wormcrawl Fissure and chose an abandoned fortress as his new home and base for experimentations. While his research into Chaos's experiments bore no fruit, Thessalar found something else to become obsessed with. Her name was Zulshin. She was a Lilund. They were a race of celestial angels that had the torso of a stunning woman, the lower body of a snake, and had feathers and wings instead of hair. Thessalar tried to study her from a distance, but became more and more obsessed with her with each passing day. He longed to inject proto-life into her body and create a new race of mutations known as the Thessalilians. In his insane mind, Thessalar thinks this as love, but in truth it is something far more darker, disturbing, and sinister. He doesn't understand why Zulshin finds him repulsive and keeps rejecting his acts of love, most of which were just frenzied attacks on her home. Her rejections has sent him into a brooding, dark obsession. He's been working on a perfected form of his proto-life, using numerous wish spells and various animal components he had collected from across the realms. He plans on using gate spells to teleport the proto-life directly into her body. In Thessalar's mind, he will improve and perfect the love of his life, whether she wants it or not. While Thessalar was expanding the Temple of Moloch, a fellow architect was busy constructing a tomb of their own. Moghadam was building the Tomb of Horrors. The two artificers were bitter rivals, and each did whatever they could to hinder the others. To them, nothing would be more insulting than having another tomb or temple out there that rivaled their own. Moghadam had lured away the sculptors, an act that had caused Thessalar to lose favor with Moloch. Moghadam had even sent thieves and a gemsmith to rob the temple, but each was swiftly captured. Thessalar returned with a thief of his own apprentice, Nulzer, who was also captured. Thessalar has begun to torture the were-rat thieves and the Genasi gemsmith. Thessalar is a cold, calculating schemer. When the heroes arrived at the temple during expansion, Thessalar began to manipulate them, trying to convince them to travel to Moghadam's worksite to either steal the jeweled teeth and see Odara's plans for crafting the jewel skull, or to facilitate a prison exchange, returning Nulzar and various sculptors back to Thessalar in exchange for the gemsmith and the thieves. This is also a minor falsehood. Thessalar hopes that heroes will do what heroes do, and result in numerous combats, and the eventual freeing of Acerak's most powerful prisoners, the half-dragon paladin named Pentaval, and the Baelor that was Acerak's father. Few villains have had such a lasting effect on the worlds as Thessalar. The Artificers' experiments have been responsible for the creation of owlbears, rust monsters, the Grick, and even the Mimic. Thessalar is also a terrifying villain who will do whatever he can to elongate his life. In the Temple of Moloch, hidden in a mysterious chamber, are a half a dozen floor-to-ceiling glass tanks. In 4 of them are elderly male figures, suspended in light blue liquid. These are Thessalar's 4 clones. The machines that maintain these clones are built from the missing components to the infernal machine of Lum the Mad, an ancient artifact with vast power. This residual magic has seeped into one of the vats. While 3 clones remain inert, 1 is awake and desperate to escape. When freed, it claims to be the real Thessalar and that the previous one is an imposter. Is this true? Or is this how all clones are supposed to think? I do not know, as I've never really delved into the science behind clones. But the idea that there could be 2 separate Thessalars existing across the planes is a terrifying thought. It seems our tea has run out. Join me again in my library for more stories and lore about the darkest villains from the darkest realms. This has been the Dastardly Decimal System, and once again, I am your librarian, Castor Cain. Do you love the Dastardly Decimal System and want to support us? Check out our new Patreon. Members will get access to show notes, official artwork, our new bonus episode series called Cleaning Up After Tea Time, and of course, plenty of cat pics of Vega voice actors Vash and Zid. You'll even be able to suggest a topic for a future episode. Check it out at patreon.com/Dastardly Decimal System. If you're not financially able and still want to support us, suggest the show to a D&D loving friend. It really helps us get noticed. The Dastardly Decimal System can be found on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Blue Sky at DD System Podcast. That's Delta Delta System Podcast. Drop us a message and say hi. Vega always loves the attention. This podcast was produced by Midnight Reading Audio, a division of Midnight Reading Publishing. The voice of Castor Cain is Larry Gent. Hi. The voice of Vega is provided by my cat, Vash and Zid. Music was Forgotten Crypts by Horrorscapes from Pixabay, licensed under the Creative Commons. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.